You're listening to another ambitious Entrepreneur Network.com podcast, the voice for entrepreneurs and small business. Now, onto the show.
This is Women in Leadership Podcast, featuring success insights from women around the globe. Now, over to your host, Anne-Marie Cross.
And welcome to another episode of Women in Leadership Podcast, brought to you by the Influence Alliance, the business building community for coaches and consultants who want to build a profitable and scalable business that they love. And I'm your host, Anne-Marie Cross. Now, my guest today says leadership is an inside job. A leader's inner relationship is the most important competency to develop. And joining me on today's show is Jenny DuFresne. Now, Jenny, she is the CEO of DuFresne Solutions Group, and that is a leadership development and training firm. The DSG team has trained over 3,000 mid-level leaders, as well as managers, to enhance effectiveness, improve their communication, and build great teams. And Jenny's 10-year military service in the United States Marine, well, that forms her foundation and her leadership foundation. Now, she is a trailblazing leader. She's applied these leadership lessons to found the only all-male public charter elementary school in Washington, D.C. And the only all-male early childhood program in the USA. Now, she is also the international best-selling author of the book, From Empty to Overflow: 5 Radical Actions Women Leaders Use to Rejuvenate, Grow Profits, and Inspire People. Now, on today's show, Jenny's going to share do what needs to be done, blaze your own path, as well as how to chart your path to success. So welcome to the show, Jenny.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. I'm so psyched and excited to be here.
Oh,
Thank
what
you
an
so much for having me.
background that you bring. Wow. Tell me, when I read people's introductions, one of the things that often, I'm thinking, did you was it nature or nurture? Let me just back up. Would you in a family that encouraged this, or did you find that there was just this inner drive from a
Oh,
young?
that's a great question. So, I, so I think that this is kind of interesting having a conversation around women in leadership. And I think this is always a debate, right? So, were you a natural born leader, or, was it things that you did along the way? And what I'd say is that I think all of us are natural born leaders. I think every woman is a natural born leader. If you don't believe me, take all the women out of any city or town around wherever you are and see what happens, right? Everything will literally just stop moving because women are influencing, we're connecting the pieces. I came from a maternal line in terms of my mother's lineage that were trailblazing women in their own right for their time. And so I would say that I inherited some of those traits or characteristics
Yes.
along the way, most definitely. And others along the way, my military career as a United States Marine, they were, those traits and characteristics were shaped and sharpened in a lot of ways. And then just, being in the world has continued to accelerate that.
Yeah, I love that you shared kind of that, you saw growing up the maternal lineage trailblazers. And it's interesting because I was speaking to someone the other day, and, sometimes even the women in our lives, our mothers, our grandmothers, our aunties, significant women, they could have been trailblazing in just the way they approach things. They didn't necessarily need to start companies, but it's just how they just did life, I think. Isn't it true? So, and I say that
Absolutely.
because so often what we do as women, we tend to look at other women, and we're able to pinpoint the incredible things about other women and what they're doing and not doing and all of that, but not necessarily able to see that in ourselves. Would you agree? Was that something that you've noticed,
Oh,
us women?
absolutely. Like, it's so hard to, I'm working with a group of very senior women leaders right now, very senior. And what is fascinating to me is that the levels of leadership that they've achieved, their leadership role, but also just who they are in the world, there's such a huge blindness to that impact in a real way, in a way of I would say in a way of the confidence that everyone else sees in them, but I don't know that they necessarily see that in themselves, right? They don't, and I don't know what it is. I think, I think a lot of women are maybe socialized to diminish that confidence, or to diminish that presence, right?
Mm.
Like in the military, like it's all about our presence, if you will. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of women are encouraged to not be that because it's considered to be too aggressive or too forward or too direct. But those are the kinds of things that women, when those kinds of messages happen to young girls, and women, I think that it diminishes our understanding of the fact that we are leaders.
Mhm.
Like, there's very there. I can ask women. I'll say to women, you're a leader, and they're like, well, but I don't have a title. It has nothing to do with the title. The title
Mm.
means nothing.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, lots of people have titles that can't influence themselves out of a paper bag. So it's not the title.
Yeah.
It's really, how do you influence? How are you transforming people's lives through your example, or through how you help them see themselves? And I think, again, every woman that I know, quite literally, is a leader. Period.
Yeah,
Full stop.
so true. And I love the way that you have defined and used the word influence. And that's what leadership is about. It isn't about titles, as you said, but how you influence someone to think better, be better, whatever it is. You could
Absolutely.
influence, positively influence through empowerment. But there's something that you said, and I want to just touch on this because it's so true. So we have, half of the well, not half, but a certain portion of the population who instinctively have the ability, the drive, and maybe labeled aggressive and too confrontational. Well, actually, that she's just speaking her mind. She's just sharing her
Right.
ideas. But then you've got, so they tone that down because they think that they're not supposed to do that. Then you've got other women that I've worked with, and you might have seen this and heard this too, that believe that to be a leader, you need to be more aggressive and you need to do whatever it is. But they've got a unique way of influencing that's not that. It's a different style and approach.
Mhm.
And I think what it's so important to confirm and to recognize is each and every one of us, with the unique skills and gifts and our approach, our attitude, characteristics, can bring that to how we lead and how we influence. We don't have to try and be something that we're not. Yes?
Absolutely. And so something, Anne Marie, so my military training trained me to be a particular type of leader.
Yeah.
And that leadership paradigm is the paradigm of leadership that I think has been pervasive globally.
Mm,
And that paradigm is the same paradigm that tells women that they can't be fill in the blank, whatever you want to fill in, right?
mm,
And the reason why I say, and I will reinforce, that women are always leading is that the way things really get done that creates a win win for everybody is through what I describe as women's natural code to lead.
mm,
Women have women are nation builders.
mhm.
And I think about here in the US, we've had, as everybody knows, we've had some real challenging political stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I've watched some of the women, there's a couple particularly that have come to mind, who have done, in their own way, collaborative, speaking truth, building bridges, building connections, building relationships, sometimes behind the scenes,
Mhm.
coming out with principled positions. But the more I've watched that, and the more I've listened to it, and they've gone across the aisle in play, the guys just couldn't. I mean, the guys were just banging, banging heads. And what I realize is that we have this natural code to lead, which is really about collaboration. It's about everybody winning, and that's what I think make women, again, our natural code to lead, and also helps us be nation builders.
Yes.
Now, unfortunately, we've too many of us don't see that that is part of what we have, our gifts,
Mhm.
and this sort of, what I call kind of it's a masculine centered type of leadership, which is very hierarchical. It's very command and control. I mean, I was raised in this, and I led like this until I got myself into some challenges, which maybe we'll talk about. But that style of leadership is actually not nation building. It's to me, it's the complete opposite. And I think in our current context, globally, we need the style that is women that I believe women have, which is very collaborative, win-win. It looks to the future, because women always have to look to the future, right? It identifies creative solutions to challenging problems. Those are some of our natural tendencies, our natural instincts, which are all really powerful to help us lead countries, lead businesses, lead families, lead cities, what have you.
Mm. And, as you're describing that, and I totally agree, one of the things that is not there, and I think that this is one of the areas and why women are so good at collaborating, is there's no ego there. There's no real self-serving, like what is it for me, but rather what can I contribute and what can we collaborate together for the betterment of
Absolutely.
the community, and not just our personal community, but how it impacts the world. And for what
Absolutely.
we've just gone through in the last 12, 14 months, we realize that we may be in individual nations and have different, cultures and so forth, but something that happens in one side of the world can shut down the entire planet.
Exactly. And I think that's why it becomes even more critical and I think we've seen it. We're seeing more and more women in politics, more and more women who are moving into companies or into businesses, more, that are more sort of forward leaning in solving our global problems, because we're no longer isolated. Not that this is a conversation about politics, but the point is we're no longer these isolated communities or cities or villages or continents. We're no longer that. I mean, you and I are talking from two completely different time zones or sides
Yes.
of the world, right? And so this very thing has collapsed our world in such a way that we have to have more collaboration. We have to have the things that the leadership style and traits that I think are really ingrained in women.
Mhm.
That does not mean that some of us aren't, really hard chargers, and we go out and we seize the day and all that. No, there are women across the spectrum. And to me, all of that we still look at opportunities to build together,
Yes.
and for the purpose of all. Like, I think, yeah, for the purpose of all. So
Yeah, I
love it.
totally agree. And I'll give you an example of how that plays out. I was having a conversation with someone who was in the US, and she was sharing about her nonprofit. And her nonprofit helps girls in Cameroon who cannot go to school because there's no toilets in Cameroon. And girls, especially at a certain time of month,
Mhm,
will not go to school because
mhm.
certain time of month. And I'm thinking to myself, I had no idea. That just cannot be. We've got to get you on the show to share your message, because I'm sure there are other people around the world that would say, we would love to support you. You're not on your
Absolutely.
own in this. And we band together by
Yeah,
sharing voices and getting behind each other and saying, job well done. How can we support you? My network's your network. That's how it's done, isn't it? Not for self.
absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah,
Let's talk
absolutely.
about what needs to be done. We've already
Yeah,
identified it in the conversation,
yeah.
but what are some specific insights here?
So a couple of things that I want to share, and it's a little bit about my story and how I came, and I'm going to just share a little bit how I came to found a school. And this isn't about the school as much as all of us are in communities, cities, families where there's something gnawing in our belly, that there's something that has to be done. So I went into education later in my life anyway, at the time. I'd had a successful career in the military, and I moved on to a successful career in corporate public relations, as well as leadership work. And, that whole time I was really asking myself the question, I've had all these amazing experiences. I ended up going to Harvard University, which was never on my radar screen. Happened very fortuitously. But I sort of came to this point where I was looking around. I thought, wow, I have all of these skills, these experiences. Walking with civil rights leaders and all this just really amazing stuff. And I asked myself, where can I take all that I have and apply it to really help shift the universe? And the answer that found back after 2 years of inquiry was education. So I prepared myself and ended up teaching fifth grade students, and through that process began to see. And I taught in a community in Washington D.C. at the time that was just severely impacted by sort of every negative statistic that we talk about here in the U.S. And I think you may also have in Australia. And so I saw all this stuff, and again I asked myself, well, what can I do? And what I was seeing was boys were really being penalized by the educational system. And so way led on the way, and I seized the opportunity to found the school. And the reason I share that is everything that led up to that was never in order. Like, I've never had a straight line life. And I think most women who are listening to this, most people who are listening to this, if you really look at your lives, our lives are sort of twisties and turns and bumps and reverse and to the left and to the right, so there's all of this sort of movement. And that was very much the same for my life. I was in the military, and then I finished a degree, then I started a school, did all these different things. And so I remember distinctly, I went to a big philanthropy conference. It was all these philanthropists from all over these really prestigious prestigious philanthropic organizations here in the U.S. And I remember walking up because I was introducing myself to everybody because I was like, I'm going to try to start this school and need to figure out what resources are. And I walked up to this gentleman, and now mind you, I'm a woman. I'm starting an all-male school that it was named after a woman. That just happened by accident, but she happened to be an amazing civil rights leader that hadn't gotten a whole lot of press or acknowledgement, but was absolutely transformative in the work that she did around education and teaching people to read. And so I went up to this gentleman, and I knew who he was, and I shook his hand, and I was explaining who I am, and he looked at me. He said, "What was your name again?" And I told him, and he said, "You're founding an all-male school?" And I said, "Yeah." And he was like, "A woman doesn't need to be doing that work." I just looked at him. And as I took myself and went to talk to somebody else, it stuck in my head.
Yeah.
Now, let me tell you why it stuck in my head. This particular gentleman was a head of a foundation. He had been in many social and civic organizations in the city at the time. He was someone that had the means, the network, the social capital to have solved or to tackle the problem that I was tackling, but he didn't do it. And so I share that story because all of us are somewhere, and again, particularly women, we are somewhere watching the world burn down, or at least it's smoldering, right? And we say to ourselves, "Oh, I don't have the education. I don't have the network. I don't have the money. I don't even know if I don't think I could lead this," right? But the reality is I wasn't from the city that I was doing this work in. I'd never grown up in the environment that I was choosing to work in. I wasn't I wasn't somebody known. I had a degree. I was a Marine. But I didn't have a bunch of social cachet when I embarked on this really life transforming organization that transformed the lives of many, many boys. And so, again, do what needs to be done. If anyone is listening right now, we have a lot of problems in our world, a lot of opportunities to bring really creative solutions, which I believe women absolutely can do. Whether it's to build a business that will change someone's life, if it's to groom yourself to become the leader that can build a team that can change people's lives or change a community's life, absolutely do it, because there is no right time. There is no perfect preparation. Those are, in my opinion, those are lies. And I say that as someone who has not done anything in order, nothing.
Mm.
I didn't go from, graduate from high school and then, go to college and then, get married. I think that's what it's supposed to be. Get married and then, have a house and, whatever. Like I've never done that.
Yeah.
Never. And, but I had some anxiety around, oh my gosh, I'm not going to, I'm not going to be able to accomplish anything because I didn't do this. The reality is that life is very, very long, as my mother would say. Life is very long. And there is important things to be done that many of us don't feel like we can do.
Mhm.
And that is not true.
Yeah,
It's
not
not
true
true.
at all. You know, as you mentioned what that gentleman said to you, one of the immediate thoughts that came to my head, and I'm sure you would go back and say this to him, and you know what, that was actually a gift that he said that, you shouldn't be doing that. Said, well, we've left it up to you men for this long. It's time for women to take over and make
Mhm.
an impact. And that's really what you're saying, isn't it? Stop. If you feel that there is a drive in you and there is something that I call it your stand for, it niggles you, you cannot help
Mhm.
but stand
Mhm.
up and say something against it. Often it's because there is something in you that can contribute. And how often, and you beautifully said this, how often do we start something? We have no idea how to do it, but it's the vision and it's the
Right.
drive and it's the thing that we say, no more. It's not going to happen on my watch
Right.
anymore. And the
Right.
resources will come. So this beautifully
Absolutely.
segues, Jenny, into the next point, blaze your own path. So maybe there's some insights that you can share that happened to you that perhaps can inspire others to take that first step.
Yeah. So it's kind of it's sort of an extension of the same story, right? I think that blaze your own path is really about not listening to all of the messages that we get. We get them from our family, we get them from television if you watch TV, you get them from a movie, you get them from songs, you get them from, all these different places. And those those messages or stories tell us that, y- you're too old, for example, is a great one, right? Or you're too young. But but for many of us, it may be that you're too old to do fill in the blank. And again, what I have learned in my life, I'm halfway through life, halfway plus through life at this point. What I've learned is that uh, we can absolutely do whatever we feel like, whatever is in our destiny. I think this is the one thing that I've certainly learned is that I came here, you came here, Anne Marie, and anyone who's listening, you came here with a specific destiny on how you are to use your gifts and talents to shift the world, period. And in the process of all this, we've taken on other people's ideas of their destiny or what they didn't do. But at the end of the day, we have to spend that time. I talk about leadership really being an inside job. Leadership is not so much about competencies and skill. It's about how do I relate to myself? Because whatever our relationship is with ourselves will be the relationship we have with others. If I have a relationship with myself that is filled with doubt, and I've certainly had this based on the messages that were given to me along my early years, then that becomes the leader that I am, right? It may be a leader that I'm micromanaging or what have you. And so take time to get connected to your own inner voice. And I'm not saying this as a mushy kind of woo woo. This is real. And the more we can all, men and women, connect to that what's in our what is calling to us internally, the more we will align with our destiny. And I say that again, that I believe that we all come with some real specific things that are our job to carry out, our job to learn, our job to give, our job to create. And it's important to us to get connected to that and to really start doing it.
Mm.
I think we see plenty of examples where people are trying to be other people. And we have anxiety because of it. We have depression because of it. We have all these other things because we're so hard trying to do something that is not in alignment with us.
Yeah.
And so this is a huge piece around blazing your own path. You really you got to do, if I don't have any hair. Now this is a big deal for most women. This is a big deal for most women. I used to have hair down to my waist. And oh
Yeah.
my gosh, between the neck ache and the care and maintenance and the I was like, yeah, okay, let's be done. And fortunately my head works. If it wouldn't work, guess what? It grows back. It's not
Yeah.
permanent. But
Yeah.
whatever it is, it's just important if you want to start a business, then start a business. You'll learn a whole lot
Mm.
in the process of doing that.
Oh,
If you want to start a school because you see a need, start a school. Start it. That vision, as you said earlier, Anne Marie, is the thing that will move you forward. But I would say any more like folks, get off the path that's not your path
mm.
and go figure out what your path is and blaze it. If you have to, I was telling a friend of mine today that I think I picked like the most difficult things. Like I think part of my being in the world is to pick the most difficult things and to clear the way for maybe
Yeah.
those who are coming behind me, or to clear the way for those that are watching who say, "Oh, I can do that
Mm.
because she's doing that."
Yeah. Yeah, brilliant. One of the things that you were saying, and it reminded me of a conversation I had with someone just yesterday, and it was beautifully, adds even more, I think, power to what you were saying. I mean, what you said was brilliant. And that when we recognize our lane, our gifts and talents, and we have this passion, we have a drive to make a real difference in a certain area, then we, by just showing up and being who we are, can influence, can inspire, can empower others to join us. And this is men and women. And one of the
Absolutely.
important things I think that we should, all moving forward, we don't empower ourselves by disempowering others. So,
Mm-mm. Yeah. Mm-mm. Yeah.
sometimes we hear a kind of movement of women stepping forward and wanting to be heard. That's great. Do that. But don't put down men's voices that,
Right.
because we need each other, and we all bring unique gifts and talents to the table. We need each other. But I wonder, when we're talking about charting your path to success, and this is the last area that you want to share some insights, hindsight is a wonderful teacher. I wonder, when you look back to your journey of, all over,
Right.
which I think we all can relate to absolutely, would there be something that you would do sooner or quicker? What would be an insight you would give to yourself a number of years ago, that perhaps you think in hindsight, I could have done that a little bit differently? Is there any lessons that you've learned?
Sure. The first one that comes to mind is doubt whom you will, but not yourself.
Mm.
That has been an area that in my life, and I doubt that I'm alone. That doubt kept me off the court, if you will, on a number of occasions. For example, when I was in the Marine Corps, I loved the Marine Corps. I loved at the time everything it stood for, and it wasn't always the easiest path by any stretch of the
Mhm.
imagination. But I love the mystique, the mythology of the institution and what we stood for, at
Yeah.
least ideally what we stood for. Um, but one of the things that I really got tied up in was I had an opportunity to advance my career, but I was afraid, and so
Mm.
I doubted my own ability to be successful in this one aspect that I had been selected. I'd gone through a selection process and had been selected, and my doubt took me off the court and out of the game. I chose, instead of to follow that particular path, I chose to leave the Marine Corps, um, at a time when uh, I I really didn't understand the impact of the fear and the doubt that was in me. And what I ended up doing, ended up going into university and slaying every single dragon that I was afraid of pursuing while I was in the military. And so that was I think one really big lesson. And I'm not saying that's a lesson that is gone. It is a lesson that I have to continue to tap into. Um, and that is doubt whom you will, but never doubt yourself. So that's the first thing is I would have doubted myself less along the way, or really try to slay that dragon sooner. The other thing is that I would say, Anne Marie, is in charting a path to success is mapping out, like like some people are like, oh, I'm gonna accomplish this by this age and that by that age, and sometimes that works, but often it doesn't, it, because that's not how life works. Life is not linear. Life is like a bowl of spaghetti, if right, it's just all this stuff. But I do think that it's important to set some ideas, some visions for yourself. Set some sort of vision around, whether it's around how you want to touch the world. I think that it's wonderful for women to think really big like that, and to not worry if, in the midst of being a spouse, a mother, a caregiver, if it doesn't all come together like overnight. That's my lesson that I'm learning now. I came into a marriage and children in my much later in life, and so now I'm kind of like, okay, well, how do I do these things that are still in my that I want to do, but I
Yeah.
don't know how to balance all this stuff. So one of the things I would just say is that, as a friend told me, everything will come together. Just continue to be persistent. And even if you do one little thing a day towards whatever your big vision is,
Yes.
persistence, step by step. Maybe doing more collaboration, pulling other people in is another part of the lesson, right? Pulling more people in to help move things forward. Because again, I think women, as collaborative as we are, we're not really super good at asking for help, or or like delegating things so other people can help move the vision forward. So I think that those would be three things to kind of
Great.
chart the success.
Yeah, great lessons. As you were sharing the insight around, kind of doubt and it changing your path, one of the things that I find, and even if I reflect over of my own life, and I also hear a lot of other women sharing too, is that we'll often look at situations, those crossroads situations in our life. We'll often look back with a bit of regret. If only this, if only that. However, when we do that, we neglect to realize, well, all right, I did shift and maybe I would do something different because I'm now wiser and I know more than I did then. But don't neglect the fact that this crossroad and the other path that you took has also got some incredible things. So sometimes, yeah, we have to let go of that. One of my colleagues shared on Facebook the other day about guilt. And this might sound silly, but years ago, I made a decision that I was no longer going to even let guilt come into my psyche, into my being. And that might sound strange, but what happens is the minute I start to feel it, I go, you know what? Stop. Let this be a lesson. What could I do differently? Could I make a different approach? Do I need to, you know what I mean? Do I need to apologize
Absolutely.
and say sorry to someone? I'm not going to take that cloak of guilt and put it on myself anymore. And that's the same with other emotions. I think I'm not going to live
Absolutely.
with regret because I'm going to look at the opportunities that this has now opened up. And sometimes life will do that. The reason why is because we needed to learn, for you from the Marines.
Absolutely.
You've a
Absolutely.
body of knowledge that you now are on, this journey and using that. And when you look at what you said, the spaghetti bowl, it's actually this beautiful mixture of, examples, challenges, but through those challenges, we shape the character that we need, that you said, that I need to now empower others who come behind me because I've lived that
Absolutely.
journey. Isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's nothing in my life that I regret. Nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, and I've had some great opportunities and some real challenging things.
Yeah.
So I don't regret is not one of the things that exists in my
Yeah.
vortex, if you will. Um, because I think, to exactly what you said, and I would definitely encourage everybody who's listening to just take a moment And, whether it's a relationship that you thought was was going to be the end all be all relationship, and it imploded for whatever reason, but there's we can make a choice. And I love what you said, right? I can choose how I experience whatever's going on. Now, that sounds great. Like, well, I was sitting here talking, we're not having any challenges.
Mhm.
But I would say that in the middle, if it's a leadership challenge in a work environment or in a business environment, that it's important that, going back to that inner life of the leader, that inner conversation, is to check in with that and then choose. We get to choose. Like, I think the thing that's been powerful for me is, oh, I can choose whether I'm going to have a crappy day all day long, or if I'm going to have 5 minutes of a crappy moment, and then I'm going to like let it go and shift my mindset to something else. And that's something that I didn't, for a long time, I didn't realize, like, I could actually master the flow of random emotions that are happening inside of me, right? Because it was all about how I decided to like look at something. And so I mean, I strongly and strongly encourage, and this is definitely the benefit of hindsight. If I was, 25 and knew everything I knew now, I'd be like genius, right? I'd be
Yeah.
president somewhere, I'm sure.
You could do it, you know?
Right,
It's
I'd be a billion zillionaire, and I'd be president
yeah.
but the reality is that the things that I've learned, and I really do reflect, I'm like, wow, had that path been open to me, let's say the military, had that path been open to me, I would have been involved in September 11th in a real way. I probably would have been deployed in a combat environment, right? What impact would it have had on me? What would so I think that there's all of those, that sort of, which gate opened and which gate did I take, which path did I take, is something to reflect on. But I don't think there's any regret. Is just not, it's not in my vortex. Like, I don't
Yeah,
I don't know
which
why,
is
but I just don't
beautiful.
regret things.
But how many people do often say, "I regret not doing that, regret not doing that. If only I had have taken, that decision or made that decision." And, they get stuck in that. They really get stuck.
Mhm.
In that. But it's so true. You've got a decision right then and there. How am I going to react? How am I going to respond? And just taking that moment, I find that as you're starting to create that new habit and that new behavior of, I'm not going to get caught up in the moment, but rather just take some time to reflect and so that I can respond better. It becomes part of how you operate, I think,
Absolutely.
doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, it definitely conditions the way you start to approach everything. It conditions the way you find solutions, conditions the way you are engaged in relationships. It makes you more discerning about the people that are around you, the experiences
Yeah.
that you want to have, and so I think absolutely that is absolutely, absolutely
Yeah.
true.
I was watching a reality TV show the other day. That's kind of my way of when you've got a creative brain, the way that you shift, you kind of shut that down is to watch reality TV. And it was about a leader overseeing her business, which I love. I just love to see how
Mm-hmm.
people interact. Human beings are very interesting creatures. And, when a decision came her way, she just said, just give me a moment. She would walk to the end of the room or wherever she was. She would come back, said, right, made a decision. And she just said, just give me a moment, need to think
Hmm.
about that. So sometimes we need to take charge of whatever. Just give me a moment, whether that be a few minutes and whether let me get back to you on that. Because situations there can be complexities in that. And I love the way that, you've said, do what needs to be done, blaze your own path and chart your path to success. And as you've shown us so beautifully, there's decisions that are made. There are, rabbit holes or spaghetti paths, if you will, that you go
Right.
down. Each provides a lesson and an insight that can, certainly enable you to build those foundations and the momentum. So I've loved today's conversation. How can people get in
Right.
contact with you? How can they connect with you, Jenny? What's the
Yeah,
best way?
absolutely. The easiest, two easy ways. One is on Facebook, just Facebook/Leader Summit, is one great way to get a hold of me. And then the other is, if you're on Instagram, it's leaders_transform. So leaders_transform is the other awesome way to get a hold of me. So I'd love to continue the conversation. Just, if people have comments or questions. I think that one of the things that is especially needed now is any of us who have had leadership experiences, it's really important for us to share those lessons and those values, and our process of becoming more impactful as leaders, or the journey we had to take internally to become the leaders we are today. So I'd love to have the conversation
Yeah,
on
terrific. Look, had
facebook.com.
some
Yep.
amazing comments. Thank you, ladies. We've had Annie Beach that have just fight. She's got a few comments there, so go
Yeah, I
back
love it.
if you want to connect with her, Jenny. But great talk and inspiration, absolutely. And Jacqueline was the lady that I actually mentioned about having the nonprofit to help the girls in Cameroon with the school. Guilt is an ego playing tricks on the mind. Absolutely, Jacqueline.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. Well, thanks once again for
Awesome.
coming on the show, Jenny. It's been an
Thank
absolute
you.
pleasure. And, you know, for people who are watching and listening and even the replay, please connect with Jenny, and she's given you the details on how you can do that. Well, thanks once again.
Thank you. This is awesome. Thank you so much, Anne Marie.
This podcast is brought to you by theinfluencealliance.com. Want to influence real change with your message by becoming known as a trusted authority in your industry while building a sustainable and scalable business you love? Find out how by accessing our free podcast series at www.theinfluencealliance.com/podcast series. That's theinfluencealliance.com/podcast series.